Hey everybody, hope you guys are having a great day today. So today what we're going to talk about is living off the grid. So I've been talking to a few people and they're like, you know what, I'm just going to check out, I'm going to buy myself a piece of land and I'm going to live off the grid. No more internet and just be self-sufficient. So I found that interesting, so I looked up some information and I came up with a pros and cons of living off the grid. So let's get started on some pros and cons. First pro, you learn to be self-sufficient. I'm talking about with like power, using solar panels, wells, you know, all your energy needs. So wind turbine, whatever you need to be self-sufficient when it comes to energy. So that could be a pro, because other people that rely on outside energy companies like electric companies, if the electric company has a problem because of a storm, then they go down. But if you're self-sufficient, you can control all that, so you don't run into that problem. So I consider that a pro. The other part of that, you know, you grow your own food. You could raise your own cattle, I guess, you know, so you don't have to rely on going to the supermarket. So if something happens and there's a mad dash, you're not involved with all that stuff because you're growing your own food. You're collecting rainwater. So being self-sufficient could be a pretty big thing. So I consider that a really good pro. And the other advantage of being self-sufficient is you're not really leaving a big footprint, because you're using renewable energies. So you're not leaving a carbon footprint. So a lot of people will consider that a pro. So you really don't have to drive anywhere, because where you're living off the grid, you have everything right there. Living off the grid, you know, you have cost savings. Maybe not the initial cost savings, because you have to purchase all the equipment to set up to be self-sufficient. But in the long term, you're not paying a monthly bill for electricity. You're not paying for food. You're not paying for water, because you're being self-sufficient. So your cost in the long run will definitely go down. Here's a pro for living off the grid, in my opinion. Privacy. If you don't want to deal with neighbors and you want privacy and just do your own thing and not have to get involved with politics, or not get involved with the neighbors doing, or HOAs or anything like that, living off the grid, you probably don't even have neighbors. So that's the best thing. You don't have to get involved with anybody. So privacy is a big pro for some people living off the grid. They want to get away from it all. They don't want to deal with all that stuff. So privacy, that's a big thing. Another benefit of living off the grid is appreciation of what Mother Nature has to offer, appreciation of the things that you could do, appreciation of the things you accomplish once you're self-sufficient. So it's a big pro. Just appreciation of just living off the land and living off your skills. So I find that a big pro of living off the grid. All right. Okay, now that we talked about some of the pros, let's talk about some of the negatives. One is you have to find a place to live off the grid. You have to take into consideration the weather and the infrastructure and the cost for everything. So living off the grid could be a great thing, but at the same time, you got to find a place that's self-sufficient, that you can have access to, that people get to you in an emergency, that you have cell coverage for emergencies. So there's a lot more to it, and cost-wise, for the initial setup. So think about the upfront expenses of living off the grid. Yes, in the long term, it will become cheaper once you set all that up, but at the beginning, you're gonna need a little bit of money to take care of all that stuff. Okay, here is another challenge, con of living off the grid. So another con is you have to have some knowledge on how to live off the grid. It's not like you're gonna say, okay, I've been living in the city all day, for years, and now I'm gonna go live off the grid. It takes a lot of research and a lot of expertise. Not an extreme amount, but it's not something you could do overnight. So I definitely recommend, getting some advice on how to do it, doing a lot of research beforehand, and all the technical knowledge you need to set up a water collection facility, hooking up solar panels, different energy, finding the perfect location. So it's not something you can do overnight, and you really have to do some research into it prior to starting it. So keep that in mind. You need some expertise on how to live off the grid. It's not something that, if you never did it before, you could do it the next day. Talk to people, watch videos, do as much research as possible. Let's talk about a con of location. So if the location is really rural where you plan to be, you probably won't have internet. You may not have cell coverage, and I strongly recommend for you to have cell coverage. The nearest hospital might not be nearby, and that could cause big problems. In an emergency, if you get hurt, how would people even know that you got hurt if you're there by yourself? So it's a big con that you really have to consider living off the grid. Am I going to be able to get help when I need it? And if you do need the internet, most people do need the internet these days just to see what's going on. If you don't have internet access, not even on a hotspot or anything, maybe look into a satellite internet system. But definitely, it's a con. The location could be a huge con, especially in the winter. If you pick a place, like say out in North Dakota where it's freezing in the winter, and you lose your heat for some reason that you set up, you could be in a lot of trouble. So keep in mind the environment, the location, the climate, the hospitals, police, food, just in case you don't have the food. You can get to a supermarket in a good amount of time, so it doesn't take you 6 hours to get to a supermarket. Make sure if you buy something in a cold climate, you're not getting stuck in snow that you can't even get out. And that's it. And have a game plan too. Just let people know where you are, so in an emergency, if they haven't heard from you in a while, they could check on you. Have a game plan saying, hey, every 4 or 5 days or whatever, or every day or every 3 days, I'm gonna send you a message or I'm gonna call you. Now that you're living off the grid, okay, you're self-sufficient, you're running a generator, or you have solar panels, or whatever you're using. So the stuff is not as reliable as you think. So have game plans. It's a big con. What if your generator goes down and you really need it at that one point? What if you have a medical device that you have to use that needs electricity and power, and now you don't have access to it because the generator's out? So that's a big con. So think about it. You need a backup to the backup. Here's one that I don't think a lot of people put a lot of thought into it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Comment below, let me know. Social isolation. Okay, you're living off the grid. 5 days goes by, 2 weeks goes by, a month goes by, then maybe 3 months goes by, and you're self-sufficient, but nobody's living with you, let's say, and you're not talking to anybody. You know, social isolation, you may not think will bother you, but maybe at the end of the day, it will bother you. You just never know. So I consider that a con. Social isolation. You know, another con is you're responsible for everything. If something breaks, you know, your power goes down, or your solar panel goes out, or your water system goes out, or your heat system goes out, there's nobody to call. You have to take care of it yourself. So I consider that a con. Sometimes something breaks and you just don't want to fix it. And living off the grid, you really have no choice but to do it yourself and fix it. So responsibility of maintaining everything is up to you. At the end of the day, I understand why some people would love to live off the grid. I can't tell you how many times I considered to buy something so I can just live off the grid when I want to get away from it all. But I've always had a plan that I can get out of there and go back into society. But if you put all your eggs into one basket and try to live off the grid, there's some pros, there's some cons. And do me a favor, comment below if you guys or girls, ever thought of living off the grid and what you think about living off the grid. To me, the cons kind of outweigh the pros, especially as you get older. But I think it could be cool if you could have the best of both worlds. Have a setup that's off the grid, so if everything does go to hell, you have a place to go to and it's all set up. Again, you have to worry about, you know, people getting to it and vandals or whatever it is, so do your research on that. But I don't know. Just tell me what your pros and cons are about living off the grid. All right. In conclusion, if you're thinking about living off the grid, think about everything we talked about. Benefits and disadvantages. Anyways, I greatly appreciate you guys watching all these videos. Do me a favor, if you like this kind of content, I'm going to be posting a lot more. If you would consider subscribing, it would be greatly appreciated. Also hit the bell notification if you do, so you're notified next time I place a video. Thank you and have a great day. Talk to you in the next one. Bye.